peek behind the curtain. A little behind the scenes secrets. Look, I got a cloak of invisibility. How about that? Okay, that's this side here. It's got some green residue behind me here. Let's clean that up. Have a peek. Have a peek at all got. No, this is OBS. Alright, let's fix our webcam a bit here. Alright, too much green. How about some spill reduction? Smoothness? I'm getting a little ghostly. There we go. Okay. I guess that's as good. No, my hair is fuzzy. Okay. What else? Whatever. Close enough. Alright. Alright, folks. Hello. Hello, Stefan. Alright, let's get into it then. Whoopsie. I better get a separate window so I can read your chat. Stick this one over here. Alright, let's break in to the D2L site. That ain't gonna work for long. Yeah, no way. Alright. Alright. 6 out of 16, guys. Seriously, that's pretty weak. Okay, let's do this. It's going to be a short critique. Okay, awesome. Awesome. We're only critiquing the final piece today. Imagine space, starting with Alyssa. So we've got the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5, the 6. Alright, getting into it. How do we do this full screen? Let's just download it. Let's see, how does one full screen this? What's your keystroke? Alright, we'll try this, but I bet you I get stuck. Press F11. Great, got it. Where is my F11? There we go. Now how do I zoom in? Doesn't help much. There we go. Beautiful. Now we can get to work. All right, folks, have yourself a look. You know what? Now that you mention it, did we talk about how to adjust the perspective or the parallax of your pictures? We're not going to have very many pictures to critique this time, so let's learn something. I'm going to save this. Oh, wait, this is a bad example because it's perfectly level. Anyhow, long story short, the problem I'm alluding to that we're going to look at the solution to is whenever you're shooting your work head on in this perfectly flat, especially overhead perspective, that's when you're going to get the reflections off of shiny parts of your picture. So we need to learn how to avoid that. Let's see if I have any examples. The idea is to shoot it from an angle, not perfectly head on, but from a diagonal angle. So let's see if I have any way to demonstrate how to fix the parallax once you do that. This technique I'm about to show you can be a little troublesome in the way that it can parts of your drawing could be out of focus, so you want to get some distance when you're actually doing the photographing. Let's see what kind of pictures I have to work with. Something like this. Did we already do this? I feel like we already did this. We did color balance and white balance and whatnot. Maybe I just keep coming back to the same example. Let's see. Control zoom, thanks. So just tell me in the chat if we already talked about this last time, but we're going back to Photoshop. And so the idea is to avoid getting those reflections, avoid getting that glare off of the surface of your drawing. You want to kind of shoot it from an angle, kind of like this picture was. And you don't want to shoot straight down at the floor while the overhead light is right behind your head, because light is going to reflect at the same angle it came in at. So if it's coming in at a straight angle, it's not going to change angles enough to miss your lens. The idea is you want your light source to be coming in like a 45-degree angle, so the light that glares off the picture is going to be glaring at a 45-degree angle as well and missing your camera lens. All right, so avoid having your light source behind your head, and if you're getting that kind of glare from the perfect forward-facing angle with your camera, then you want to shoot it at a different angle. This is, like I said, this is kind of worst case scenario post-processing, and like I said, it could give you some uneven focus. Like if we were metering our focus off the bottom here, then the top could be off focus. It's important to shoot for like 1/3 of the way into your space. Okay, now, so once we have one of these crooked angled shots, how do we fix it once we have it? Control T is the short answer to that. That's the keystroke for free transform. Like I said, when in doubt, go to the image menu. Let's see. So I don't know where free transform is, like this. Okay, well, I guess remember Control T then. Yeah, I don't know, who cares? First thing you need to know though is that your layer here can't be a background layer. That means it's It's a perfect two-dimensional locked layer that you can't manipulate because it is determining the bounds of the picture itself because it's the background layer. So all you have to do is right click on the background layer and go layer from background, and now you have a new floating layer that you can manipulate. For instance, now that it's a floating layer, you can do things like this. When before, you would not be able to do that. Convert to a normal layer. Hey, it did it automatically. Okay. Now that that's a floating layer, we can do a free transform on it. Now to prep it, I like to pull out some guides to show me what, perfectly level and parallel with the edge of the photo is going to look like. So I can pull those guides out from this ruler, but by default the ruler's not there. You have to go to the Windows menu, or is it the View menu? Yes, it's the View menu. And see, that's the default state. Go to the View menu, activate rulers, and then let's drag these rulers out to kind of the halfway point on each edge of the picture, right? So no matter how straight the edge actually is, like this one for instance is already pretty straight, but we want it to be perfectly parallel, so we're going to aim for kind of halfway in between these two corners, like so. Halfway between those two corners, and bam. All right, now I have guide set up. Let's do a free transform. So Control T, and when you hold down the control button, well, let's show you what it does by default. If you just grab one of these corners and pull on it, it's going to resize your picture. But that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to distort it. I'm trying to grab this corner and move it independently of the other one. So I'm going to hold Control, and you see the arrow changes to white, and now I can pull this out. So what I'm trying to do is get the corner of the picture in the corner of my my guide box. So this corner here, I'm going to try and get into that corner there. Hold Control, pull it out. Now every time I do this to a corner, it's going to distort the other corner. You see it got that one out of place, but I'm just going to keep working or making my rounds from corner to corner until the adjustments don't distort one another. Gotta zoom out a little. Now you can save some time on this process of fidgeting with each corner by cropping it down as much as possible without cropping the actual image. In other words, the more extra space you have between the guide box and the edge of the photo, the more it's going to distort each corner as you move them around. But we're getting it done. So again, your shot, Alyssa, is perfectly level, perfectly framed and parallel with the frame of the camera. But because your light source was behind your head, you got that glare. If you're ever kind of stuck in those circumstances, if that's the lighting you have to work with, then in other words, if you can't move the placement of your light, move the placement of your head, right? And your lens. All right, everything looks more or less croppable now. Got a little bit of a black corner here. We don't want to lose any part of our composition, but we also want a nice straight clean crop. So, we might be willing to lose that tiny little sliver of the picture. But here's we can afford to lose that one too. All right, so there you go. You've corrected the parallax. So now come to the crop tool here, and if you have snap on, the crop bars will, or the cropping brackets will snap onto the guidelines. If you don't have snap on, that's going to be in the view menu. Right here it's snap. Alright, so now we have a nice flat picture. Finally, we want to make sure it's the same dimensions as our drawing. Now this mural was 10 feet by 15 feet. I know that off the top of my head, so all I need to do is to get it to a 10 by 15 ratio. You do that in image size. We don't want to change the size of the photo too much, but we do need to distort its dimensions. So you want to make sure that resample is on, but you also want to make sure that your dimensions are not linked like this. You want to make sure there's no bracket conjoining them. Now I'm just going to go to inches rather than feet, and you see it's 13 inches wide versus 15 inches wide. So I'm just going to fix that. Again, I don't want to change the general scale of the picture, so right now I'm just going to round these numbers off with the resample function off. So it's going to change both proportionally. You see it's automatically changing my width, right? But it's also changing my resolution automatically, so I'm not losing any resolution in that process. So once I get my height, which I know I want to be 15, where I want it to be, then I can hit resample again, and now I can change 13 to 10. See, it corrects the distortion. Even though it's 15 feet by 10 feet, it's still 15 units by 10 units, so I can use inches just as well as feet in this circumstance. Now a new function with Photoshop, this is bonus material, close your mind off if you're already at your limit of new info. But the current version of Photoshop has this Preserve Details 2.0, which is sort of a smart blur in a way. If you're enlarging a small photo rather than giving you a lot of JPEG artifacts and ugly pixelation, it will attempt to make up new detail or blur the pixelation the best it can. So that's a smart new feature. That's a Photoshop thing. It has nothing to do with preparing your drawings. Reduce noise, crank that up to 100. See the difference? I don't. Okay, now we have a piece that is proportional to the original and flat in my photograph. Do some quick contrast. I win. Shut her down. No. Alright, so that'll be saved for posterity in this video if you ever want to refer back to it. Alright, Photoshopping shop talk over. Let's get back into the critique. What was it, F11? Beautiful. Okay, this is great perspective. Great 2-point perspective. Farmer's Market. Is this a version of Oklahoma City? I guess we don't have a Sky Needle, so it can't be. I don't know. I passed by the Farmer's Market yesterday, so I was wondering. But this is a beautiful building. So great perspective, good values. I like the cast shadow coming off this building. I like the light planes and the shadow planes where they're at. So you're doing a great job of getting a consistent light source going. The only issue is scale. So you see how big this door is, how big these windows are. Compare that to how tiny this door is in the foreground and how small those windows are. Now compare those windows to these windows. So I think this building should be a lot bigger, or conversely, Well, just shrink the floors on these other buildings, make those windows smaller. So the trees are to the right scale of all that. And yeah, that looks right for a parking garage next door. And these buildings look like they're the right scale compared to that. It's just these buildings on the in the background. Their height isn't a problem. It's more a matter of the scale of the windows. All right, looking great. Now, the shadows, we could have gone a lot darker on the shadows on this object, especially right at the terminator. You may notice that shadow planes seem darkest a lot of times at the terminator, and that's just sheer contrast. That's just the fact that there's a bright light plane next door, kind of overloading your retina. So that value, just because it's in the proximal area of your lazy retina, that it looks darker. But that's also a way in two-dimensional achromatic art to make it look like there's intense light on the scene. So if the shadows were, as dark as this black one here, right at this edge here, then just by virtue of contrast, that would make these feel like they're more brightly lit. And we could even, use the background to our advantage to kind of just faintly darken the sky as it recedes behind these bright light planes. Cool. So, what do you folks say? I don't see any comments here. So I'll open the floor for comments. How many people do I have watching this, by the way? 8 viewers. Great. So, be my guest. I'll let you guys have at it. Please check the video resolution. The current... Whatever. So, no comments? Let's see. You really like the level of detail. True that. Especially these neat designs on the ceilings. Great job. This works as receding really far away because the perspective is so flat on it. That's something about perspective you'll find, that the further away you are from something, the less foreshortening there's going to be, aka the flatter overall it's going to look. Sky says, I think the center building is gorgeous. It's a wonderful centerpiece. Yep. So was that your own design, or did you find this image online, or this building online, and kind of reconstruct it the way I did the Taj Mahal? Some of the background buildings are blurred. Yeah, that's fun. In the same way we learned in the ink wash drawing that you can get the same kind of implication of depth through focus as you can through contrast. I think that's a pretty neat touch, especially obviously way back here. There is such a thing as too much detail sometimes. Design-wise, there could be too much detail if it's obviously distracting from any focal points, or if you're losing the overarching structure of the composition. That could be too much detail formally, but conceptually, practically, should I say. Practically, you got to get your work done, right? A drawing that's never finished is never going to amount to its full potentiality, no matter how much of a perfectionist you are. So it is a practical matter. You do need to pace out your timetable and negotiate the the logistically appropriate amount of detail for the amount of time you have. So let's see. Alyssa based it off of a photo of a future of Boston and twisted it into to take the future of Boston, like conceptual renderings of the future skyline. That's interesting. Okay, good job, Alyssa. Claps. F's in the chat. Pay your respects. Okay, where are we at now? There we are. Going back. Okay, Fernanda. Off of that photo, but the surrounding buildings were made from my own thoughts. Excellent. Yeah, that's the best thing about this linear perspective stuff. Is you can fabricate your own worlds if any of you are interested in. Let's see, download that. And comic booking, obviously, you need to know linear perspective. Is this the right one? Yeah. Alright, I like the fact that it's kind of sepia toned just by virtue of the photo. This is a excellent conceptual piece. So you're actually using this imagined world to tell a story rather than just imagine a world. You're imagining your universe building. You're not just making up a single scene. You're actually filling out the full context complete with characters. I'm impressed. So the light on the mountains are really nice compared to the light on the building. That all looks really good and consistent. Perhaps the cast shadows from the trees could be stretching in this direction or to the left a bit more, or let's see. So it seems like your shadows on the trees are receding towards the vanishing point, while the light on the mountains, at least on this side, seems to be coming in from the left side, or our left side. So one thing about cast shadows relating to depth or the foreground versus the background, what you're doing is sort of an extremely exaggerated version of the truth. Cast shadows that are in the foreground, they're going to cover more vertical ground, but it might just be more like a 45-degree angle if the light, or if the shadows on this side seem to be kind of perfectly sideways facing. But it is true that shadow planes and cast shadows in the foreground, they're going to be a lot steeper, and then as you go backwards towards the horizon, it is going to look like the light source is coming in from the side more. That's just foreshortening. So I would still kind of keep a bit more right facing, or the light coming in from the right, so the cast shadows kind of angling more towards the left here. Great figures. I love the depth and the pupils you're creating here. I like the style on the figures. It's not realistic, but it's still, proportionally correct enough to, it feels, I don't know, more like a comic book or manga style rather than a cartoony effect. So I'm really impressed with that as well. Just the character building in the features of these faces, her gigantic eyes compared to his relatively smaller eyes. It seems like it's more symbolic of the different characters than it is, you know, proportional discrepancy. I believe that you know is more linked to character building than anything else. Now, perhaps the proportion on these eyes is a bit off. Maybe the eyes are a bit high on the head. It is true that your eyes are the equator of your head, meaning there should be just as much space here and here as there is here and the top of your head. So these are a little closer to the center. I think that's where this one in particular differs a bit. Maybe it just seems like the eyes are a bit too high on the head, especially at the angle she's at. These two, you know, they could be raising their head just a bit, which would change the foreshortening of the head, but she's coming in a pretty steep angle, so I think the eye should be maybe where these cheeks are. So what do you folks think about the textures in the background? Is Fernanda applying the lessons we learned in the last one? Let's see. Stefana says phenomenally awesome. Ash says really like how the detail focused towards the center of the drawing. Sky says the highlight looks great. Indeed. Here, here. So, long story short, your textures are really effective, not just for describing materials, but also the way you're kind of chiseling out these flat planes in your mountains with these kind of diagonal lines. Keep thinking of your pencil as a chisel. So the direction that your chisel is cutting, it matters. Think of your drawing in that sense as if it's a shallow relief carving made from different planes rather than a flat two-dimensional surface with just mushy smudges on it. All right, Abby, the background looks really hazy and gives me a dreamlike state as you focus on the front of the drawing. Very well done. Also love the contrast. Indeed. Good. Good job, Fernanda. Clap, clap, clap. F's in the chat. Is that still a meme? Alright, how do I get out of here? There we go. Now, what am I doing? I full-sized the wrong thing. What are you doing? There you go. Alrighty. Moving right along. Alright. Oh, well, let's see, Skylar, did you get it into the late one? Just out of curiosity. Let's see. Giving you the benefit of the doubt, maybe you posted 2 and the clock timed out on you. Nope, we'll get that in. So, actually, I got an email asking that question, incidentally, was how are the grades broken down? The Imagine Space piece is like the, think of it as the big exam, while the boxes, exercises were more like homework assignments. So as such, our big critique drawings are worth 50 points, and the exercises that I just returned back to you, those are worth, well, that I used to anyway, are worth 10 points. So yeah, Scholar, you definitely want to get the Imagine Space in. That's not to say, Fernanda, that we shouldn't get your 9-box problems in. There's 20 points there. All right, Nicholas. Too big? I should have used your drawing as the Photoshop example. Let's see, can we get this perfectly framed? Yes. All right, Nicholas, what do you folks say? Now the perspective on the bricks sort of works on this wall, because this is, you know, it seems like if this were 1-point perspective, this would be the more forward-facing wall. They're not quite working on this wall because while it recedes diagonally, the bricks are pretty flush and forward-facing. I'm wondering though if any of these lines are heading towards a vanishing point, but that would be the answer how to render the bricks on this wall. Your verticals are fine. Those are the consistent edge in a 2-point perspective drawing. But all of these long horizontal lines would not be present in a 2-point perspective drawing. But let's just, for argument's sake, say that this was a 1-point perspective drawing. Let's actually move this into Photoshop for the sake of argument. Can I copy you? Do I have to really save it? No, I do need to save it. No, I'll forget you. Arrow. Show in folder. Open viz. More apps. There. Alright, let's use the magic of Photoshop to help us out here. Alright, so let's extend this a bit, make sure our background is white before we enlarge our canvas. Let's do 300%. Okay, well, whatever. Alright, so for this street scene, first thing we need is a horizon line. So let's see. Let's pretend we're, I guess we can't be at eye level to the door because the street keeps going up. So let's just kind of place our eye level, our horizon line right there. Now let's place our vanishing point based on this edge here. Let's see, let me get my line tool. If this we're heading in that direction, then that shows us where this line intersects the horizon line. That must be where my my vanishing point should be. So that means that any one of these diagonal lines should be coming from my vanishing point. So the same vanishing point we use for this, the edge of this wall here would be the same vanishing point that we use for that the side of the curb, the side of the street there. Oh, was it white? Oh, it's brown. Stroke. Okay. All right. Give me a black stroke. Okay. Thank you. Bye bye. Gonna work now. That sucks. That sucks so much. Look. Oh, you make me angry. Alright, well, there's a lesson in there somewhere. So we'll just pantomime the rest out. So you see each horizontal row of bricks would be, oh look, if as long as I'm in the same layer, no, okay, whatever. So each of these horizontal rows of bricks would be heading towards this vanishing point. In fact, the dots or the lines down the center of the row would also be heading towards that vanishing point. And if we really wanted this to be a 2-point perspective piece, then that would mean that this wall would be heading towards the same vanishing point as that line there. In fact, every single horizontal row of bricks would be heading towards the same vanishing point, as well as the street and the row of lines. All right, well, maybe we should demo linear perspective through Photoshop from now on. All right, so so as far as the light goes, I like this implication of another building here, which is fairly consistent with the shadow on this opposite wall. So that's some good world building beyond the frame. All right, Stefan. Nice. All right. Whoopsie. Almost. All right. So you're I like the way you're employing your trees into the illusion as well. The house is really solid. I think really the only pointer I have is it's another scale issue, but it's only with the mailbox. If we follow the height of this back along the sidewalk, that means basically the mailbox is as tall as the front door. So if that was about that tall, your perspective would be pretty flawless. Here though, it seems like each background tree is overlapping the tree in front of it. So that's a little problematic. So you see how it kind of shears all the trees, meaning it kind of distorts its width or its perspective a bit. So that would be a nice, like you're doing here. See, that really, they're the same trees, but this row seems nice and round. We feel the depth behind it. This one kind of feels concave because the background trees are overlapping those. Really, really good job. Really nice 2-point perspective. I can follow all these edges to their definite conjoined origins. Excellent. What do you folks say? How about the values? Value-wise, I think perhaps if you treated the smoke coming out of the chimney the same way you treated your trees, it would feel, a bit more billowy or, a bit more voluminous. Good job with a consistent direction to your light. Nice. Let's see. Any final comments, folks? Now, when it comes to the contrast of your lights and shadows, it's often difficult to overshoot the contrast, I think. Unless, of course, you're drawing white objects as if they're black, that's a problem. But especially in the foreground and to the same extent, the middle ground, it's usually safer to err on the side of more contrast rather than light. So if we really blocked in these values here, that would not only make the house feel or deeper, more voluminous, but it also make the light seem more bright. I know it could seem counterintuitive to make your light source seem brighter. You need to make your shadows darker, but that's just contrast. That's just the way our eye understands the world. Of course, your shadows are going to be darker if your light is brighter, if you only have a single light source. So be a little bit more bold with your shadows. We don't want our darkest or boldest shadows to be in the background. This is a good example here. Yeah, be really bold and beefy with your shadows, kind of like you're doing here. Let's see. The shadows are done very well, says Ash. The atmospheric perspective is really well done. Like the cast shadow on the chimney. Yes, yes, yes. Here, here. All right. Last but not least, let's see. Uh-oh. Is there any logic to these at all? Okay, let's do the biggest one. I bet you that's the one we want. I guess right. Wow, Abby actually did the postcard aspect of the what the assignment would have been if we had paper I could give you. All right, let's boom, boom, boom. Full screen. All right. What do you folks say? You're really capitalizing on texture, and graphite pencil, by its nature being such a fine tip, lends itself really well to texture building, and by extension here, landscape texturing, which you're doing phenomenally. I love the way the strokes are a lot more horizontal in the flat ground, a lot more vertical in the trees. That goes back to that chiseling issue I was talking about. The direction of your marks, if you have diagonal marks, that's going to imply there's a plane that's angled diagonally. So, of course, when you use a series of horizontal marks, that's going to make it look like it's on a plane receding this way. Good job on that. Let's see. It's the bottom one. Let's see. Also, the glare caught the right upper side of my paper. Those trees are supposed to be dark. Yeah, I figured that was what was going on here. I think the main issue, though, value-wise, is the white space here. So you could argue conceptually that's a baller move, but compositionally it really throws the whole thing off balance. It'd be the same case, I think, even if it was a dark void. So perhaps some kind of gradient void. Or, I mean, this is so textural up here, though. There would have to be some kind of texture, even if it's just the way you're kind of hatching your marks. But yeah, design-wise, we need some more stuff there, especially since there's so much fine-grain detail up here that flatness just doesn't cut it. So, good job up here. What do you guys say? I like how you turned into a floating type landscape. Yeah, we just need some air. If it's gonna float, give us some air. I left you a note on my submission. Plan on. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, great job. Yeah, so if you can make the rest of the drawing match the intensity of the top, whatever that means formally. In other words, it doesn't have to match the intensity of rendered detail necessarily, but it needs to match the formal intensity. And formally, what's making the top so intense is texture. That's the formal principle that's making this part really appeal to our eyes. So I think the simplest solution is just to get as fine grain of texture in the bottom there. Excellent. Okay, this was a good one. I kind of spun off on some tangents, but when in Rome, I don't know what that means. We had time for tangents today, I think, is what I'm trying to say. So if we're doing, if we're doing online classes next semester, which I don't know if that's the case, I'm just speculating, but for all we know, we are. We need to know this Photoshop stuff, right? And this photographing stuff. So again, great job on including this. Perhaps something you can do now, Abby, with this is to include more architectural stuff. You do have this, well, clues as to the linear perspective. It doesn't necessarily have to be architectural stuff down here. Maybe just the way you're hatching your marks. So, tangent time. Whee! Back in the Photoshop. All right. So, let's talk about how to reverse engineer a vanishing point. And before I do anything else, let me try and change this to black and change this to maybe 50. Now, hopefully that works. All right, so first you need to find your horizon line, and in some cases that can be easy to do because you can follow the receding edges on your photo. So you can follow any two receding lines. They don't even have to be opposite. In fact, it works better if they're not. This one is a tricky one. I guess we're going to have to use this line. But wherever this line, receding backwards, intersects the other line, that's our vanishing point right there. So let's map that out. Or at least that's the vanishing point for this particular wall. You could, in theory, do the same with this wall, but that looks like a pretty obvious, occasion for a one-point perspective. You could try and use this car. It does have receding lines, but let's just deal with it as if it's a one-point perspective drawing. So, if you were going to build any kind of architectural structures down here, you could, use this vanishing point as your guide. Or like I said, even if you're mainly filling in some kind of a dark void, if all your marks kind of recede back towards that vanishing point, that would kind of fill in the same linear perspective as the building. So, food for thought. All right, we learned lots, didn't we? Yes, we did, but I'm not saving you. All right, so any final comments, remarks? Otherwise, it's really coming down to the wire. I think it's time to start talking about our final project. Let's see. Let's find out what the academic calendar is. So ask any questions you may have right now while I'm going over this. Let's see. Academic calendar. All right, so we wrap up. Let's see, what does that mean? What does that mean? Important academic dates, office closed, no classes. Oh, okay. Let's see. Spring semester ends on the 8th. So, rather than the rules we normally do, let's see, normally we, our capstone assignment is due at the final critique, which would be our exam date, but we can actually go all the way to the 8th this time. So, looking at a calendar, kind of, wow, yeah, we're just about out of time. So, let's see, I guess that extra week of spring break kind of threw us off. Normally the capstone drawing is 4 observational drawings done on those big pieces of Bristol board that we got at the beginning of the semester on our syllabus. So there's clearly going to have to be some adaptation with that assignment. So on Tuesday, I'm going to run down the final assignment. Essentially, it is, well, I'll just introduce you to it now. We'll recap what it is. But essentially, we have, oh, damn it. We have 4 classes left. And that's normally how many, yeah, but then if the, yeah, we're going to cut that down to a couple of drawings. The final capstone assignment is normally 4 value-based observational drawings done on a large scale. So for ambitious compositions, normally we make you do these ambitious compositions by building huge still lives, literally from the floor up to the ceiling, and then you have to kind of crop out a good composition from there. So just from the sheer volume of stuff, you're going to end up with elaborate compositions. But in this case, you guys are going to have to commandeer that complexity for yourselves. So what we're going to do on Tuesday is I want for you to send me, I'll open a Dropbox now, I want for you to send me sketches, like research sketches of what your first observational subject will be. So that's it can be anything as long as it's observational, meaning it has to be a 3D object in the same space as you. It can be your car, it can be a landscape, it can be a portrait, it can be a still life. As long as it's observational, meaning not from photographs or not from your imagination. We're getting back to basics, learning how to see, or at least this is your final exam for you to show me that you've learned how to use your eyeballs the whole semester. They have to be done in, they have to be value drawings, meaning they have to be specific medium. You have your choice between graphite, compressed charcoal, reductive charcoal, really any of the value mediums we did. If you happen to have brown paper and you want to do a temperature drawing, that's fair game. If you have black paper, you want to do one of those light-based drawings with white charcoal or chalk, be my guest. I'm even open to experimentation as long as it's dry media, and as long as it's more or less value-based. Color pastels, I think, would be fair game because, they're a lot like charcoal. There's a lot of gradients and blending associated with them. So if you want to dip your toes in color, be my guest, as long as it's either chalk pastel or watercolor. I don't want to see any acrylic paintings, any oil paintings. We're not painting, we're drawing. So as long as you can defend it that way, I can consider watercolor drawing as much as ink wash is drawing, right? But keep that in mind. It's all about light and shadow. So not only are you composing a observational scene from real objects, you also want to control your lighting. Spotlights are the best idea because those will show you those definite terminators, right? That's why we've been working with spotlights all semester. It's just easier for you when you can see the volume played out on an object with that terminator. Let's outline those mediums again. The default ones are graphite, compressed charcoal. Let's see, Stefan, color pencils. Yes, color pencils are okay, but color pencils are time consuming. Let me just let you know right off the bat. Now, one thing I want to warn you against with color, if you're dipping your toes in color, let's limit it to one. Just one of these two drawings can be in color, because I don't want you to distracting yourself from value. That's the first thing art students forget about when they start playing with color, is value. You end up with muddy pictures because all the colors are, peak intensity, meaning they're all middle gray value equivalent. So only play with color if you're experienced enough not to lose sight of value. Remember, these drawings are primarily about light and shadow. Again, control your lighting. Obviously, if it's a landscape or your car in the front yard, you want to make sure you're doing it around about the same time of day every day, so your sun's coming in from the same angle. But obviously, the easiest way is going to be to do it indoors with lamps that you can control. So I keep distracting myself. Graphite, compressed charcoal, reductive charcoal, white charcoal, temperature charcoal, ink wash. I think that's all the value mediums we did. So the only assignment that wasn't value based this whole semester was the contour line drawing, the line quality drawing. So as long as you're not giving me a contour line drawing, you're safe, right? Any of the other mediums we did were more or less value-based. You can still get in trouble drawing those contour lines in charcoal or graphite. You still have to force yourself to resist reinforcing your light gesture lines. That's where your contour lines come into the process, is early on, very lightly, to fence off your shapes so that you won't lose them as you're filling in these gradient values. So when you make that switch, when you switch gears from gesture sketching to value drawing, don't begin on the outside edges, begin on the terminator with your values, so that you're, that's where, if you're using a spotlight, that's where the hard edge will be, along the terminator. All right. Let's see, if you don't have the Bristol paper, well, just make sure, the main thing with the Bristol paper was its size. So if you don't have the Bristol paper, I don't want to send you out to buy things. As long as we're not drawing smaller than our drawing pad paper, the 18 by 24, we're okay. Meaning, don't give me 8 by 10 drawings, because the level of detail and the ambition and the composition is going to be compromised just due to the smaller scale. All right, so no final questions. We'll talk more about your capstone assignment next time, but what your homework is for the weekend is to prepare your subject, whether you're going to do a portrait of a family member, ask them to sit the way you plan on drawing them, arrange the light the way you plan on having it, or if you're doing a still life, set that up over the weekend. Or if you're doing a landscape, go on site and bring your sketchbook with you and do like a small little 3x4 or 5x7 rough value sketch of it. Meaning, don't give me an outline drawing as a sketch. I want to be able to see where your light's positioned. So give me a very rough, fast value sketch of your first capstone drawing. And then on Thursday of next week, I'm going to be looking at your sketches for the second one. So in theory, you could be cranking both sketches out over the weekend and devote your time from Tuesday on the first drawing. So that's your timetable. On the 28th, I'm looking at your first sketches. On the 30th, I'm looking at your second sketch. The 5th and the 7th will be lab days where you can send me your progress. And then the ultimate due date will be the end of class on the 8th. So that's 2:40. The drop box for your capstone assignments will close, and there will be no late box. That is the end of our class. So there's your ultimate deadline, not just on the final capstone assignments, but also any late assignments that you owe me. I will open another Dropbox for resubmissions. So if you want to resubmit something that you submitted in on time, or if you need to make up a drawing that you still owe me, that will be the Dropbox for that. All right, I feel like I covered everything, and now I'm just talking your ear off. All right, so I will talk to you folks next time. Yes, go away.